Hello folks, welcome back. So in this particular video we will look into the failover concept of ASA, right? How do you configure ASA to work in a failover kind of a environment, right? So what we look into is something like this, right? So logical topology is put up here on the screen. Forget the one at the bottom, let's just look at the one at the top. So we have like routers R1, R2, and we have one ASA. Let's call that as ASA1. And this is the basic standard, topology, right? Standard ASA configuration, right? So we're basically trying to put up a ASA, and this is the inside network, and this is the outside network. And we have like two VLANs here. One is VLAN 20, VLAN 10, and we have two Ethernet, 2 gigabit interfaces. The 0/0 is the outgoing interface, and 0/1 is the inside interface of the ASA. And that's pretty much straightforward, isn't it? So let's just do this configuration to start with, and then we will see how we can introduce another ASA to provide the failover or kind of like a standby for the primary ASA, right? So let's start with configuring only this. So if you look at my screen, I have set this up on the GNS3. I have my R1, R2 and the switch, and let's concentrate only on ASA1 for now. Let's just pause this. Let's not even look into ASA2. Let's just look at ASA1. So we'll configure R1, R2 and the ASA and the switch, right? So like I said, this is going to be my logical topology. So how do I convert this physical topology into a logical topology? Using VLANs, right? I think we have done that repeatedly in my earlier videos as well. So if you look at here, we have like I said, this is the inside network, and we are going to have VLAN 10 here. So which means this interface F/1, 1/1, the fast Ethernet 1/1, and if you look at this ASA, there are three interfaces. One is the 0 interface, 1 interface, and 2 interface. So we're going to use the 0 interface for the outside interface of ASA, right, which is basically this one, and we are going to use the 1 interface as the inside interface of ASA. And the second interface, let's just not use it now. I will tell you why it is used later, right? So which means my fast Ethernet 1/1 and my 1/3 and 1/4, these are the interfaces which I have to put in a particular VLAN so that we convert this topology into something which looks like this, right? So VLAN 10 is going to have my let's just revise. VLAN 10 is going to have fast Ethernet 1/1 and fast Ethernet 1/4, right, because one of the interface of the ASA. And VLAN 20 is going to have fast Ethernet 1/2 and fast Ethernet 1/3, right, because 1/3 is nothing but my outgoing interface or the outside interface of ASA, right? Let's start configuring this and we will take it from there, right? So let's start configuring the switch. I think it's better we put all the interfaces on duplex full so that we don't have any mismatches, right? This has nothing to do with the ASA configuration. This is just for the sake because we have all these switches here running fast Ethernet, and you have gigabit Ethernet on the other side. So I just want to make sure that all of them are uniform. So I'm going to put them in full duplex. I'm going to put a speed of 100 Mbps. Now the VLANs which we discussed, right? So let's start with putting the VLANs up here, right? So this is what we discussed. Fast Ethernet 1 and 1 and 1/4 goes in VLAN 10, and the other two interfaces go in VLAN 20 because of the situation which we have here, right? So we want VLAN 10 to be on the inside of the network and VLAN 20 to be the outside of the network, right? So that's why we have done this, right? Okay, my bad. Now once we are done with that, what do we do next? So I think that's basically the configuration on my switch, right? So let's pick this up and put it on my switch here, right? There you go. That looks good, right? So we have done this. We can also look at the, let me probably clear my screen. I think you're not able to see this. right? So if I do show VLAN switch, right, you can see the two VLANs which I configured and the interfaces inside that, right? Looks good. Yeah. What do we do next? Let's go and configure my routers, right? R2 and R1, right? So what do? We do a basic configuration on the routers, which is, start with R2 probably. What do we have to do on R2? I need to put in the IP address on this interface, right? Probably also enable telnet on that, because we might have some testing to be done, and maybe also let's put a loopback interface, right? So let's do that. Okay, so let's do that on R2. So on R2 I'm gonna, this is basically the basic configuration of host name and all of that, but this is going to be my interface, right? Which is my interface over here, Ethernet 1/0. So I'm gonna go inside Ethernet 1/0, put in IP address is 192.1.20.2, because that's my network here, right? And maybe let's push this here so it's easier to have a look, right? So that's good. And the last one is, let's also put a loopback interface, right? You can put a IP address here, and we are also enabling telnet on that, right? And let's also put a default route towards my ASA, right? Because R2 is over here. Let's put a default route towards my ASA, which is this interface, towards my ASA. So we are going to probably use the address of 192.1.20.10 for my outside interface of ASA, so we can use that, right? Let's do that, right? That's good. So that was R2. Now we gotta do something for R1, right? So R1 is going to be pretty same as R2, right? Let's do that as well. So R1, as you see here, so we have R1 here. So we need to put in an IP address, we need to put a default gateway as well, right? So this is good. We're gonna put in an IP address. So so we go to the interface Ethernet 1/0, right? We're gonna go into the interface Ethernet 1/0, and we put the IP address as 10.11.11.1. IP route is 10.11.11.10, right? Because that's the network. We have 10.11.11.0, so the inside interface, which is basically this one, right? This is going to be 10.11.11.10. We've done that. What do we do next? We have done probably, and we have also enabled telnet on this, which is pretty good. So I think that's it. These two configurations should go inside the routers. Let me put the router one. Let me pick this up. Let me put this on R2. Right, let's put that. There you go. Well, that looks good. Okay, so we have done that on R2. What do? We will next go and put this on R1, which we just wrote down. So that's here. Right, so that looks good as well. Good. So we have done R1, R2, all good. And yeah. Now, so we have done configuration on R2, R1 and switch. Let's do the configuration on my ASA, right? So on the ASA, what is the basic configuration we want to get this up and running? We need to configure the interface over here. We need to configure this interface, right? Inside outside interface. And let's also put a default route, right, towards the outside network. And maybe we'll also enable NAT, right, so that the inside network can reach outside, using a public address. So yeah, I think that looks good. Let's do that basic configuration. I mean, this is something which I've already done, so I'm just picking it up from my previous videos. So let's do the interfaces first, right? So we have two interfaces. One is the outside interface, and the other one is the inside interface, right? So the outside interface will carry address of 192.1.20.10, and the inside one will have 10.11.11.10. And we will also put the default route, right, towards my R2, right? Good. And the last part is let's also enable NAT. So we have done this before. For NAT, we have to create a pool before. We'll create a pool of the IP addresses which are usable, which is 192.1.20.51 to 100. And we will also put a object network, right? We need to define the inside outside, so that it uses this particular pool which you just now created. So these addresses will be translated into one of these addresses as the packet goes out, right? So I think that should be good. Let's pick this up and put it on my ASA. It's actually ASA 1, so let me put it as ASA 1 here, right? So this looks good. So till now I have not done any failover related configuration. It is basically my normal configuration which we have done on ASA, right, so often. So how do we test this if this is working? R1, R2 and the ASA. Let's probably go on R1 and let's tell it to clear screen. But before that, probably let's check the ASA if everything worked. So what we'll do is we'll ping 192.1.20.10, sorry, 20.2, right? So we reached out to R2 from here. Let's see if we can reach out to the loopback address of R2, which is 2.2.2. Yeah, that works. Let's also ping downwards, which is 10.11.11.10. Yeah, that works as well. So our ASA, everything is good to go. Now let's see if we have the connectivity from R1 to R2, right? Let's say if we can telnet to R2. So when we telnet to 2.2.2, right? Yeah, we need to actually have this working, but it is not. Okay, so probably I did not set up the default route on R2, so let's do that. So probably clear the screen. So we need to have a default route from R2 towards my ASA as well, which is this one. So I believe this was not put on the device. So let's see if that works. Let's put this. Okay, so now let's go to R1 and see if this works. Yeah, there you go, it worked. So if I do show users, right, so we have this working, which means I was able to telnet from R1 to R2, right? Perfect. Now we are actually diving into the actual failover concept, right? So what we are interested now is when my ASA1 goes down, I need to have something to back it up, right? And that's where ASA2 comes into picture. So now we have established this one, let's do this one. So we have this ASA, R2, R1, all of this configured. Now we are going to put in the other ASA, which is ASA2, right? And we're going to make sure, right, so the active standby failover works, right? So you need to remember there are 4 things here. You need to remember what is active, what is standby, what is primary, and what is secondary, right? So the box which is in the forwarding state, or which is in the forwarding mode, it is basically called as the active device. The box that is not forwarding but will have all configurations replicated from the active box, that is called as standby box, right? Standby. Now which box becomes active? It is based on what you have configured. So if you configured this device to be the primary, then when the network comes up, this particular device becomes the active and this becomes the standby, right? Active and standby is something which will continuously switch whenever you have failovers, but the primary and secondary is something which you configure and it kind of gives like a priority, right? It resembles priority. So once you configure this to be primary and secondary, it will always remain primary and secondary. And because this is primary, this will come up, right? ASA1 will come up and becomes the active, and this will also come up, but then this becomes a standby, right? And because it is the standby, it will receive all the configurations from ASA1 or from the primary, right? And that's why you need to make sure that the interfaces over here on the ASA2 are also in the same VLAN as the first ASA, right? So we are going to put this gigabit 0/0 and 0/1 in the corresponding VLANs. This one will be in VLAN 20 and this will be in VLAN 10, right? And in between them, we are going to give one LAN link, right, which is going to be gigabit 0/2, which will act as the heartbeat, right? So whenever ASA1 goes down, right, this particular link will indicate it to ASA2 that something happened to ASA1. Now you need to become the active, right? So that is the use of this particular link in the center. So let's start configuring the failover mode now, right? So let's start with ASA1 itself. So how do we do the failover configuration? Okay, so like I said, we have a new link over here which is gigabit 0/2, and in my topology I'm using gigabit 2 as that link, right? So let's start with unshutting that particular interface, right? I'm still on ASA1, right? Let's just do no shut on this particular interface, right? So let's do a no shut. Great. now the failover configuration comes into picture. Okay, so what do we do in failover? The first thing is we need to define the LAN link, the LAN link which is in between these two ASAs, which is gigabit 0/2. So let's define that. It's failover LAN interface. This is just a keyword, you can use anything. I'm just calling it as fail, and I'm saying gigabit Ethernet 2 is going to be that interface. Next, I need to put the IP addresses, right? IP addresses are very important. So you need to put an IP address for this interface. So how do you do that? So we say failover interface IP, the fail is the interface name, and this is going to be the IP address 10.100.1, and this IP address is going to be taken by the active, right? And the standby, is also going to get a IP address, and that's going to be 10.100.100.2, right? So that is what we are trying to do here. So one side of the interface is .1 and the other one will be .2, right? So we have done that. So this is basically like the bootstrap configuration is what we call, right? There should be like basic configuration on both my devices, and only then the rest of the replication will happen from active to standby. But this is like the baseline. You need to compulsorily or mandatorily configure this bootstrap failover configuration on both the devices, both the ASAs. So the next is failover LAN unit primary. You're making this as the primary, which is ASA 1. Like I earlier said, primary just denotes the priority. And we can also put in a password so that the information between the devices is encrypted, right? And we explicitly call out failover here at the last. So this is the bootstrap configuration which I was talking about, right? So now let's do the same configuration on ASA2 as well, right? So if I do the same configuration, I'll have to pick the same thing. The only difference is going to be that this is no more primary, this will be secondary, right? So that's it. So that is basically the configuration. Now let's see if this works. Let's pick this up and let's put this on ASA1, right? There you go. That worked. Yeah, the configuration went well. Let's also copy the configuration on my second device. Right, let's just go down here and put this. Okay, so we have something like no response from mate, and now the response, it has got the response, so it is trying to replicate. So you can read this, it says end configuration replication to mate. So since ASA1 is the primary, and ASA2 is the secondary, the configuration from ASA1 got replicated onto my ASA2, right? So that is pretty good. How do we check this? We can check this by using the command show failover, right? So you can see here, you can say that this is the primary, right? And yeah, so that looks good, right? So we can run the same command on my ASA2 as well. Let's do that, and you can see that it's calling it as secondary. And you can see if you do a show run, you can see the configuration has been replicated. So you can see here gigabit Ethernet 0, 1, we had never configured it on ASA2, but it got the configuration from ASA1, right? Pretty awesome, isn't it? So that is basically the failover main concept which I wanted to cover. Maybe let me also touch upon some other interesting details here. Now if you want to, so because when you have this router to be the primary router, when you have this ASA to be your active, and no configuration is allowed on my standby, right? So what do we do? How do you reach your standby? So you can use this mechanism. So what you can do is you can go down to, let's go down to my ASA1, and if you want to add another address so that you can reach your gigabit Ethernet 0 of ASA2, this is how you do it. So we had done this before. We had put an IP address on my gigabit 0 over here, 192.1.20.10, right? But what if you want to reach the other what if you want to reach the other interface? Okay, maybe give me a minute. Did I do this right? I'm just checking if my interfaces are configured the right way. Let's do this. Okay, so I think I missed a step. I did not put the interfaces. Right, so VLAN VTI. Yeah, I think I missed a step. So, like I said earlier, you see here these two interfaces, they should be in the same VLAN as my earlier ASA. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna put my this interface 0 interface on VLAN 20, 1 on VLAN 10, and I'm gonna create another VLAN so that these two interfaces are in the same VLAN. So I'm gonna create like VLAN 10 or 100 or something like that, right? So let's do that. That's mandatory as well. So let's go to my switch. This is my switch, right? So we had done this one, so let's do this. Okay, let me put it here so that I can explain it to you guys before I do it. Yeah, there you go. So what I'm gonna do is the fast Ethernet 1/6 1/5. And why is it 1/6? This is your 1/6 and the other one is 1/5, right? So this is my second ASA. I need to have my second ASA. So 1/5 is your outside interface, so it will be in VLAN 20. 1/6 will be in VLAN 10, and the 1/7 and the 1/8 is going to be together, and they're going to be in VLAN 100. So I had missed this piece, so let me put this now. Let me do it one after the other, probably. That is good, right? So let's go back again and do 1/5. Okay, this was a step which I have done before putting the failover configuration, but that's fine. I can do it now as well, right? So, and the last one, right? So now everything is in the same VLAN. Let's clear this. We can check if everything worked. How do we do that? Yeah, that looks good. So we have all the interfaces the right way we wanted, right? So now this should work, right? So yeah, that looks good. Okay, so now let me continue. So this was ASA 1, this is ASA 2. The configurations has been replicated, right? Yeah, let me check. Did it have a switchover? Show failover. Yeah, this is still the primary, and this is still the active. Okay, which is good. Okay, great. So now what do we do next? I wanted to talk about yeah. So like I was doing here, let me go down. So it's this ASA. If you see here, you might have a question as to how do I reach the ASA2? How do I reach the gigabit Ethernet, the 0 interface, right? The outside interface of ASA2, right? Because this IP address is already being used here. ASA1 is using the IP address of 192.1.20.10. So how do you reach, the gigabit Ethernet or the 0 interface of ASA2? So for that reason, we can use this concept. So we can use this as a standby address. So now you can reach out to that interface using this address. Similarly, I can replicate the same thing for the inside interface as well, right? So let me do that. There you go. So this is how you reach out to the prior actives inside interface, and this is the standby, right? Looks good. Yeah. Now the last part which I want to cover here, maybe let me put this as well, the configuration on the router. I need to do that only on my primary or the active, so it's good. Okay, now the interesting piece. As you see here, when I did a show failover, you can see there is it's mentioned as stateful failover. So what does this mean? Stateful failover means that let's go back to this. So imagine you have a telnet session running from R1 to R2, right? So we have a telnet session going from R1 to ASA to R2, ASA1 and R2. Now when the telnet session is on, let's say ASA1 goes down, right? Now the switchover happens to ASA2, but will the telnet session be active? No. The reason being all the return entries or the connection table which was there in ASA1 would have not be sent or will not be sent to ASA2 unless it is a stateful failover. So currently what I have configured is a stateless failover, right? Statelessness. So it's stateful failover is something which we have to configure for for the connection table to be sent from ASA1 to ASA2. Okay, and we can actually use this, we can use any new link if you want. We can actually connect another link going from ASA1 to ASA2 and tell the ASAs that use that particular link to share the connection table, or we can use the existing link as well. So in this case I already have 0/2 interface or the gigabit 2 interface, and I'm going to use that, right, to get this job done for me. So I'm going to do that, and I need to do that only on my ASA1. So here you go, failover link fail, and I'm gonna say use this, right? So you can now see the difference when I go and put this on my ASA. Let's clear the screen a bit. Okay, so that looks good. Okay, so now let's go and test it, right? That because we have introduced the stateful failover, let me show you the output of show failover here. You can see that the stateful failover is enabled and we have a interface as well, right? Great. So what we do now is let's go and telnet. Let's go and telnet to 2.2. There you go, it's open. And this is my ASA1. If I do show connections on ASA1, you can see the active connection here, right? Let me go and check the connections on ASA2. Yeah, you can see the connection getting replicated here as well. So in case ASA1 goes down, the connection table is shared with ASA2 as well, and as a result of that, this connection will still be up, right? This is the same connection. You can see here the port 28928, and here also you have the same thing, right? So that's basically something which I wanted to cover here, the active standby configuration of ASA. Hope you liked it. Stay tuned. Bye.